Oh, let's see if I can see. Okay, so sorry to talk to you in the darkness. My name is Beatriz. I'm Spanish. I come from London. I live in London. I usually work in the sculpture format using materials, and I will show you a little bit later that. But now I thought I would start with just 1 minute, a bit more than a minute of moving image collage that I have been working on here that it's a 10 minutes, in total it will be 10 minutes, and it will be part of a little installation here in these next few days, and that will be part also, as I said, an installation also with some sculptural work. So just to introduce, I will start with this video, which I think just gives an inkling of my ideas in terms of talking about surface, the body, and landscape, or the city. So let's see how it goes. Let's see. Maybe the sound will go. If not, I will start again. Yeah, I don't think the sound is coming.
Was I saying to try to take out the people there?
Okay, it doesn't really matter, but yes, we'll try.
Like the television, the old trick with those.
Oh, no, we can't. If not, I'll just leave it with the moving images. But,
Okay.
a slippery silvery glow and crawling cracks, wetness and warmth over the dormant silence. Bumpy, absorbent mutability. Embroiled in straits and coils of perceptual affection. Eerie recognition, veininess in the gaps, rock body coming to surface. So this is the end of the minute and 20 seconds. And basically, in the context of this, I thought that I would continue, but just talking about a few ideas that I think describe the way I've been thinking doing the work here at Taratan, but to some extent also reflect my thinking when I have been working sculptural work until this point. So basically, in the relationship between body and city, I'm particularly interested in the skin as an interface and also as an analogy. And the skin looked at in terms of materiality and also looked at as landscape. So in terms of materiality as a surface, which is porous and actually is able to absorb and excrete, so basically it has a function of exchange. Also is an elastic material which is able to adapt very easily to change. Obviously that is involved in the sense of touch, and that it also acts as a protection. So I find that clay, for example, is a material that has many of these properties, that is very sensitive to the environment and also absorbs a lot of water and gets very dry when it's hot, for example. It's porous when it's fired, and then it becomes sealed when it's glazed. So just introducing this idea of the clay and the fired clay, I'm already thinking of substitution materials. So I'm very interested in industrial materials, man-made materials, and how culture has always tried to imitate nature and exhibit. But in this relationship, there's always this opposition and complementarity in between both. In terms of the relationship of skin and landscape, I'm very interested in the ability of the skin of animals, for example, to mimic their environment for the purpose of protection. This will be camouflage, and how pattern and ornamentation in the skin plays a big role in this optical illusion. Also, pattern and ornamentation they play a big part in terms of identity, but it also has the ability to dilute this individual identity in the group or the landscape. An example for that would be, for example, the zebras. The stripes of the zebra as an animal, they make them very visible, but they are a very social animal, so they move in groups. So when they group together, it's very difficult to say one animal from the other. So this is a way they have to protect themselves from the predator, the lion, who cannot stop on a single individual. So also the ability of insects and snakes to change their skin. So every so often they molt and they leave basically a whole skin suit behind. So in terms of this, also the relation to metamorphosis, the ability to change, the hybridity, at this stage of not being one thing or the other, or perhaps being both things at the same time. And going back a little bit to molting, I'm interested in also how this is a sign, a trace, a leftover of something, of a presence that in a way creates a mapping of this presence that was there before. And in relation to this leftover or mapping, I'm also interested in the myth as leftover from culture that actually maps our understanding of things and our way of thinking, in a sense. So basically, to put in these ideas back together in clear examples that I've been looking at. So this is a section of a painting by Henry Rousseau. I decided just to take this section because it was the best resolution that I can find online. So a while ago, I found myself basically looking at Henry Rousseau's paintings, these jungle paintings, and I was quite fascinated by them, but I really didn't know very well what that was, apart from the fact that they have this mysteriousness about them, and also they are quite playful and humorous. But now that I have been thinking a lot in terms of camouflage and all these ideas, I can see very well how this plays here, this playfulness in ideas of visibility and invisibility, a very high ornamentation, and something that is very artificial. Henry Rousseau made up actually these landscapes. They are not natural landscapes. They are collages basically from studies that he did visiting the botanical gardens and zoo in Paris. But because they look so exotic, there was this myth around him that he actually had been in the colonies, but in fact he never left Paris. There's another fact about him that I only knew these last couple of days, and is that he claimed to be the inventor of the portrait landscape. So basically, where the subject is defined by her surroundings, environment. And this is another idea that I'm really interested in. So basically, when I came to Lisbon, I could not help but be struck by the surface of the floor, the pedestrian that is called here the calzada, isn't it? And perhaps it's quite obvious this similarity to the snake skin, but I think this is something that hit me first time when I came, and I think I was influenced by what I had read before coming, and it was about this legend about the construction of Lisbon. Basically, the legend goes, as I read, that Ulysses, the Greek hero, came and founded Lisbon, and he fell in love with Ophiucha, that was the queen of the snake women, the queen of snake women. Actually, I understand that the Greeks knew this area of Portugal as Ophiucha. But anyhow, the question is that when he left back to his homeland, Greece, Ophiucha became really furious, and she made the land tremble with her rattles, and that is what created the seven hills of Lisbon. So for me, when I see this, what I see basically is this legend. I see the skin of this presence, of this this character that was here in legend, at least. And for me, the calzada also obviously is a mapping to of the city, so a way to move yourself around the city. So basically, thinking of this, following this idea of the body and land, body and map, body and landscape, I came across these images that I was quite interested in, or very interested in. That is why I have put them here. And actually, the left one is a map from the 16th century, and apparently it was very typical in the 16th century to make maps or represent geography with the contours of the body. It could be human or it could be animal. And in the right-hand side is a miniature painting also of from the 16th century. And basically here what the artist was doing was make a representation of the tattooing in the tribes. Well, this is called the young daughter of the Picts. So the Picts were a tribe in the British Isles. So he was making a representation of what they understood the natives were, how they were decorating themselves. But the funny thing is that in another little article I read that this type of floral ornament came in fashion in Europe at that time. So basically this is totally an imagined representation of what was the kind of pattern, what kind of tattooing the natives or the tribes were doing at that time. But I think that's interesting. So going back again, so when I knew I was coming to Lisbon, and I had never been in Lisbon before, so basically as a tourist, I started to look a little bit into the city, and I could not help, obviously, to make this analogy between the tiling or the facades and the skin, which is a quite obvious analogy, but doesn't matter. I really liked it a lot, and particularly the ornamentation of the tiles reminded me of tattooed skin. And I have chosen this image of Japanese tattooing because Japanese tattooing, as you can see, is highly ornamental, and basically it covers practically the whole body, and it's something that is really embedded in Japanese culture. So what I want to say with this basically is that ornamentation and tattooing is not just a decoration, but it plays a big role in identity, and also in ritual and protection. For what I read about tattooing, for example, in tribes, people tattooed themselves with images of animals they were afraid of. So I understand this was a strategy to mimic these animals so they wouldn't be attacked by them. Also, I don't know if it's true, but I read that in Lisbon, after the earthquake, it became a custom to put devotional tiles on the walls to protect from future catastrophes. So another aspect for me, just from personal experience, moving in the streets of Lisbon, one thing that has struck me in relation to this lining of the buildings is this idea of constant transformation, constant mutation, constant metamorphosis. I mean, when you walk around, you will never see a building with a facade or yes, the front, facade, sorry, that is the same as the next. It's constantly changing. It's very similar. The main elements are the same, but there's all this very slow, constant movement, and this is something that has really fascinated me. So, sorry, more talking. Going back a little bit about the idea of and my reading about the relationship between body and city, I came across this book called Flesh and Stone by Richard Sennett, and there was this particular chapter called Moving Bodies, where basically he explains how the planning of the modern city in the Enlightenment in the 18th century was based on advances or new discoveries in the physiology of the body, particularly the circulatory system and how the blood moves along veins and arteries. Also at this time, a new emphasis was given in the importance of clean skin for a healthy body, because I don't think they had the hygiene customs that we have nowadays. So yes, basically the planning of the modern city was with the idea of constant moving, circulation. So not only main roads, but also collateral roads that would avoid blockage, because this idea of constant movement was very important for health, basically. So then in the chapter, he continues to talk about how this happened in cities like Paris, London, and Washington, for example. So basically, in this intersection between city and biology, I came across this short essay by Elizabeth Gross called Bodies and Cities. And I, in this instance, I think basically I'm going to quote her, because I always love when you come across somebody who has the articulation enough to say what you are thinking, but you cannot articulate yourself, basically. So you will have to forgive me because this is a little bit wordy, but I'm going to just start reading a little bit of the first paragraph. And you can read. So I have attempted to problematize the opposition between inside and the outside by looking at the outside of the body from the point of view of the inside, and looking at the inside of the body from the point of view of the outside, thus re-examining and questioning the distinction between biology and culture, exploring the way in which culture constructs the biological in its own image, the way in which the psychosocial simulates and produces the body as such. Thus, I'm interested in exploring the ways in which the body is psychically, socially, sexually, and discursively or representationally produced, and the ways, in turn, bodies reinscribe and project themselves onto their socio-cultural environment, so that this environment both produces and reflects the form and interests of the body. So I know this is a little bit, as I said, a bit too wordy, but I think then in the last paragraph just summarizes in the sense that what I am suggesting is a model of relations between bodies and cities, which sees them not as megalithic total entities, distinct identities, but as assemblages or collections of parts, capable of crossing the thresholds between substances to form linkages, machines, provisional and often temporary sub or micro groupings. So that's it. So basically in my own work, I tend to use materials, industrial materials too, and this is not my work, this is something else, but that think of how these materials that surround us affect our view of our own corporality and subjectivity. So to frame this, basically I have decided to use this frame. It's a collage of images that I found online, a frame and a glass ornamentation. The frame, just to repeat myself, the idea how our environment, what the materials that surround us contextualize us, how we understand ourselves through them. And the glass ornament, just to introduce how once I went to an artist talk and she was talking about the glass delusion that was apparently very typical around the 17th century. And basically this is where people really believed that they were made out of glass, so if they fall they would break. And the way she put this or introduced this glass delusion was that this was happening at a time where glass was introduced as a material of production. So this relationship between the two. So now I will show you a couple of images of work, my own work, that basically, as I hope you can see, as I said, that I'm using here a lot of plastics to reference body, but in the form of landscape. So there's a lot of geometry, figuration, this movement between abstraction and figuration, apart from fragmentation and landscape. And this is another example. So just to go following this intersection between ornamentation, the figure, the body, culture, nature. Another thing that I came across that I was caught my attention was these decorative figures that were very typical in Renaissance. They are called grotesques, but as you see, they have nothing to do with the grotesque as we understand it now. In terms of, so they were figures that were developing into something else, usually plants, and so hybridity and metamorphosis are essential qualities of them, basically. And in this sense, they are also representations of temporality and transformation and change. And they were actually typical of spaces like corridors, galleries, staircases, basically spaces of passage that highlighted this idea of transformation. And also the relationship between inside and out. So I'm nearly finished. So I thought that to finish, I would present the work of 3 artists that I think they represent these ideas really well and that I really admire. And the first one is Francesca Botman. She was a young American photographer who played with long exposures using black and white photography and her own body in interior spaces. So as you can see, this long exposure made her body blurred with the objects and the space she was in. So yeah, I have a quote about her. Let's see if I find her. So I just found this quote of something that she said about her own images because she didn't see this as self-portraits, as portraits. And she said, along, am I in the picture? Am I getting in or out of it? I could be a ghost, an animal, or a dead body, not just the girl standing in the corner. So in relation to this way of working, I haven't included any image, but I am also really like Francis Bacon's paintings, which work in a very similar way of figures, human figures that are mutating into animals many times, and they are framed in the context of interior spaces. Another artist is John Stesaker. He's a British artist that uses collages with found images, usually film stills of the 1950s. And what I really enjoy about him is his straightforwardness in the way of working. And I have put these two examples because I think they make a direct reference to what I have been talking about, that is the hybridity between body and landscape, and also in this case in terms of gender. And another artist that I find very interesting is Hito Steyer. She is a German artist, and I had the opportunity to shoot this film by her at Tate Liverpool recently. How Not to Be Seen, a fucking didactic educational movie. So basically in this movie, what she's talking about is she's dealing with ideas of visibility and invisibility in the context of digital technology, and how visibility is determined by resolution. So basically what is not captured by resolution is invisible. So I chose this particular frame of the film because it's showing the green screen that it uses in the film, which basically is a device to allow visibility or invisibility whenever you want of things. And also this frame that captures this image, that is where the video was shot, that is a crumbling concrete resolution target in the California desert, once used by the US Air Force to test the resolution aerial cameras. So I think it's a great film. It's around 15 minutes. I only found just 2 days ago that it is readily available online. She's very generous, and I think I will finish my presentation there. Thank you very much for listening so much.
Yes, marketing from Zaratan. They're actually presenting their work next week on the 28th and 29th. If you can be here, you can see the whole project being shown. Thank you for coming.